Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First United Methodist podcast. I am your host, Thomas First, and I will be interviewing people from our congregation so that through great stories, laughter, and tales of the experience of the God who is an active agent in our world, we can get to know one another. Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First UMC podcast. I am your host, Thomas First, and I am excited to have with me today my longtime friend, Natalie Thomas. Natalie, I'm trying to think, how long have we known each other?
Oh, okay. We moved to Memphis 8 years ago, and it was shortly after that that Jennifer and Lucas invited us to church with them, and I think that's when we met you. And then the early days of Bluff City Church and all that. Yeah, I don't know how long
Yeah.
has it been. It's
Yeah,
been a
so
while.
I guess you all came right at the end of my time at the church that shall not be named.
hmm
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, we were
Gotcha.
there for. I think we were there for one of those sermons.
Nice, nice. So, your husband is Joseph Thomas. Your children are Anderson Thomas and Cora Thomas, and then oh gosh, why is this? Yeah, I keep thinking Troy
Wilson,
Bolton. Troy
Troy
Bolton.
Bolton. Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
Wilson. But yeah,
yeah,
he would probably
Wilson
rather be called
Thomas.
Troy
You
Bolton.
have some of the coolest kids into theater and rock climbing, and Cora is just like so spicy and fantastic. So I am super glad that you are joining me today, just as my guest to help folks get to know you and you get to know other folks.
Well,
Um,
thanks.
so how I want to do this podcast is usually like I just have a series of questions that I ask folks, and then I just riff off of them, and we just get to talking. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So the first question I'd like to start with is, if you were to think back in your life about the first person that sort of like you associate with God, like as in this person taught you about God or modeled God or maybe didn't model God, but God somehow used them to speak to you and say, "Hey, I'm different than that." What kind of memory comes up for you?
Um, that one, I was so surprised when I read through the questions that you sent. I was surprised at how hard that one was,
Uh,
specifically. But I think that it was my grandmother, my Granny Reed. We didn't go to church when I was really little. That's not something that's been ingrained in me from the time I was born. It started when I was about 6 years old, 6 or 7, maybe 8
hmm.
was when I started going to church. But my granny always, not always, but every once in a while, she'd say, Natalie, do you want to come to church with me? And I'd say, well, yeah, sure, because I just liked doing things with her because she was my
Yeah.
favorite person when I was little. But she went to a primitive Baptist church. Are you familiar with primitive Baptists?
They're like really fundamentalist, right?
Oh, yeah. You went in and there's barely any electricity in the building. Women sit on the left with the children, men sit on the right. There was foot washing, but the women washed the men's feet. I never saw it
What?
the other way around. That was part of the communion. And then afterward, all the women would prepare amazing food and they would bring it and we would sit in the little tiny foyer, sit in the little handcrafted pews that were who knows how old. And we'd eat together and play tag and go see the creek
My
out back. That kind of
gosh.
thing. But that was my first experience with church. And so she's my first memory of being in church. But more importantly than that, church wasn't my first experience with God. Like,
Ooh,
even
okay.
though I didn't go to church until I was a little bit older, and it wasn't a regular part of our family's life until I was a little bit older, like, I always believed in God. And I remember when I was little, laying on my back and looking at the clouds and going, who made that? And it was just this internal sense of everything was made and everything had this divine origin, and just wanting to know about it and explore it. And my granny also instilled that in me. She would always take me outside and take me to the mountains in East Tennessee. And yeah, my most consistent, healthy connection to God has been through nature my whole life. And she's probably the first person who fostered that.
Do you still to this day like kind of have that? experience of like divine creation and connectedness when you're in nature?
Yes, it's the place I feel most in tune with God. And like church has never been that for me.
Yeah, yeah,
But nature always has been. There's just when religion becomes difficult and challenging, especially in American culture, for me, it may not be for everybody, but for me, when that's become challenging at different points, and I've questioned, is this something I even need to hold on to? Is this even something that is true? When I've questioned what is true and all those things, I take a deep breath and I find a space outside and I go like immerse myself in it and I go, I don't know if all of it that I've been taught is true, but I know that this is.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's always kind of grounded me and brought me back to it.
I've heard other people say, and I think this is somewhat true for me. Like I've never found human created spaces to feel all that sacred. I've been to Israel twice, right? And one of the things that I felt a lot of frustration about was that everywhere I went, there was some cathedral or chapel that had been built over this like sacred site where Jesus did this thing. And it's like, yeah, but there was no church building here when he did this. Like, I want to see the space. I want to feel the natural elements of this. And so I've never felt that inside a building. In fact, sometimes quite the opposite. But it's interesting hearing you talk because the one time I remember sort of feeling awe was when I went to visit the Muir Woods in Northern California, which is like the cousin to the Redwoods. And I remember feeling
Mhm.
like that was a sacred space. So that's really cool. Like I'm so glad that you have that experience. And I think it'll be interesting to see like the connections between some of these different interviews because I think a lot of folks, some of their earliest memories of interacting with God also have to do with their grandparents or some older member in their community. So it's
My
really
granny
cool.
and I, we did not agree. It was so interesting to reflect on that because she and I did not agree on much theologically. We didn't agree on anything
You're like, I ain't
politically.
touching those dudes' feet.
No, like I mean, there was so much that we did not agree on. I won't say we didn't agree on anything, but there was so much that we didn't agree on. But I remember we moved here about 8 years ago in July, and in October she passed away right after we moved here, which was tough. But I remember I got to see her. It was the next weekend was going to be her 85th birthday. And it was me and my cousin Nicole, who's 14 years younger than me. And so we got to experience completely different versions of this woman, but she was such a central force for both of us. So it was really, really cool for us to get to experience that. But it was both of us sitting beside her chair, and we knew that she didn't have that much longer to live. And I got to tell her, I was like, Granny, I just want you to know that my whole entire life, you are the person who, in my life, who I never saw give up on this. You're
Yeah.
the one who modeled that example. And she had so many reasons to. She had so many, I won't get into all her business, but she had so many excuses. If you need an excuse to not be a person of faith and to walk away from it and to say this is too hard and to just be done with it. And she's the only person that closely connected in my life that never did that. And I got to thank her for that
Wow.
example. And I think the last thing I said to her was, I'll either see you next weekend for your birthday or I'll see you on the other side. And she was
Yeah.
like, you better, either way.
I
Yeah.
love it.
So it was a really cool experience.
It is interesting to like think about like why some people who have every excuse do sort of jettison religious faith, and then other people who have every excuse dive further into it.
Hmm.
Um, so you were talking just a minute ago about sort of being in nature. Would you say that your earliest experience of God was in nature? Is that how
Yeah,
you would answer
literally.
that kind of
Yes.
experience with the clouds?
Literally
Yeah.
the clouds. And then I remember the first time I saw the ocean. I remember the first time I saw mountains and just I can't look at it and not think there's some divine element to it, you know?
Wow.
And I didn't
Wow.
understand what it was, but I knew that it was something that was beyond what humans have the capacity to do.
That's incredible. You might be interested to know that the Catholics have a whole strain of theological reflection called natural theology, where they just say, "What can we tell about God just by observing nature
Hmm.
and our awe at the mountains and things like that?"
Yeah. I need to look
Um,
at that.
yeah. So, okay. So would you say then that your grandmother was your spiritual hero slash role model, or did you have a different person in mind for that question?
Okay, so Joseph and I talked about that. And again, she was the person who kind of grounded that sense in me
Mm.
from the time that I was itty bitty. But she and I did not, we didn't agree on a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I was talking to Joseph about that, I was like, I'm having a hard time coming up with this. And he goes like Bonhoeffer, he goes into people, famous people and people
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
read and all that. And I'm like, no, I was like, I appreciate that about you, but I'm trying to think of somebody in my life who's set this example. And we talked about it and I was like, I think I have somebody. And he was like, hey man, this is not a person who is um and I was like, it's cool that this is the opportunity that I had to think about this and that this is the conclusion that I came to, which will make sense in a second. But I was like, this isn't a person who's been really in my life. It's been a person who's been kind of present, but distantly present. She was my teacher in high school, and then she
Uh,
was my colleague when I taught at the high school that I attended as a student. And it's Miss Ruth Pierce. It's Lucas's mom.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, she is another one of those people who like she's set when I think about the fruits of the spirit, you think love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. She models that so beautifully and she's so quietly loud in her convictions and it's the
Uh,
most beautiful thing and you've never met anybody who's like, oh, I cannot stand that woman, and you've never met anybody who, like, you can't be mad at her. She's so beautifully gentle, but she's also so bold
yeah.
in her belief and the reasons behind it and her convictions. And it's just, she's always been that way. I met her when I was 16 years old, and she's just kind of quietly set that example. And I remember we went to church with, she was our fellow church attendee when we went to First Methodist in Savannah. And so I got to know her more then. But even, I remember one time, it's just little things that she did too. We'd put together a devotional book one time, and they asked everybody to just kind of write something, and I put mine in there thinking nobody's actually even going to read this. And she was so beautifully encouraging. She was like, Natalie, that
Oh,
was so wonderful. Just any opportunity that she had, she takes to encourage people and again, stand so boldly for her convictions. So
that's
she's
so
a
cool.
really great role model.
And I bet like if so again, just for those of you who are listening, we're talking about Lucas Paris, our finance chair at our church. Lucas Paris's mother was Natalie's high school teacher and then later mentor teacher, right? So or coworker.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, like having known Ruth for years now. I mean, she is everything that you described. And I think what's interesting is like so many of the people that we would look up at as spiritual role models or whatever probably wouldn't even think of themselves in the way we describe them. Like they see their own imperfections or whatever. And yet what you talked about was these very key moments where she was like a very influential in your life
Mhm.
and like just somebody who was present and encouraging. And this thing these words of encouragement that she probably forgot about years ago, like stayed in your heart and
Yeah. And
come
I
up
don't
when you
think she
think about her.
realizes she does so much for the community. She really does, but she never, there are people in, I mean, it's a rural Southern community that we grew up in, it's very traditional in that sense. And everybody's kind of, it feels like people are doing things for a lot of attention. It's a very attention seeking community. She's so polar opposite of that. She doesn't do anything for the glory of it. She doesn't do anything to get attention. She has a servant's heart and she seems like she always wants to make the world around her better, whatever little piece or corner of the world she's occupying in a given moment. She just wants it to be the best that it can be and as beautiful as it can be. And she's just every single environment where I've encountered her, that's been the attitude she's approached it with. So I
That's so
admire that.
incredible. I have thought literally over the last, uh, 13 years that I've been in Memphis or whatever, and the different times I've met Ruth, like, and I've had conversations with Lucas where I remember like there would be a group of us and we'd be like, dude, how come we didn't get to have your mom? Like, like your mother's incredible, And he'd be like, I know. He's like, she's good. So
She really is. And ironically enough, I made two B's in high school and she was one of them. It was Spanish too. And as mad as I am about the B in that class, she's still like one of my favorite people ever.
that's awesome. That's awesome. It's so funny. Like one of your harshest memories and one of your
Uh-huh.
best memories is tied to her. That's so
Yep.
great. Okay, so just as a sort of, I mean, potentially really fun question, but I think like an insightful question, just sort of peer into who you are as a person. Like if there is a story from your life that represents the essence of who you are, what would you say?
Oh gosh. Oh, okay. That was the hardest one. That was the hardest question. And I'm still like, I don't know. I'm definitive Enneagram one. Have we talked about the Enneagram before?
I mean, I don't know if you and I have, but yeah, so you're a perfectionist.
Yes. And always there's just this internal voice that's constantly criticizing everything.
Hmm.
So for me, I don't know, it's just always, no matter how good I do at something, it's just constantly, nothing's ever good enough, which is really hard to maintain faith in a world where you're constantly feeling unworthy of things. I was asking the kids that question, and Cora was telling, they were telling me, talking about me yelling at people in traffic. Um, things like that. I don't yell. I say, "Come on, Warren, push your little gas pedal. I believe in you. I believe you have the capacity to push your gas." Things like that. But I don't know. I don't know. Joseph was like never feeling worthy of praise,
Mm,
kind of a thing, and just like
yeah,
always, if anybody gives me a compliment, I kind of like
yeah,
physically
yeah,
move away from it. I think that's probably it. I don't know if there's like one story. It's just more sort of the way I exist in the world.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I don't
Yeah.
know, like, so I'm an Enneagram 8, and I don't know if like there's some overlap in our personalities here. Maybe the motives are different, but I sort of also shrink back from that, anytime someone compliments me or something. And I have been wondering probably the last year, like, what would it mean to just like embrace their words as a gift?
Ooh, they challenged us to do that at my job, not last
Oh,
year, but the
okay.
year before, and we've joked about it, but it's kind of moved into our student body. They told us because so many of us are perfectionist teachers, and we're really, really bad at giving praise and receiving it as a whole. We're not great at that. High achieving, always like aiming to make things better and not focusing on what already is good.
Yeah.
And so somebody, I can't remember who the speaker was, but they challenged us to give compliments. And if someone gives you one, to utter the words, I received that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we did all year long. And then we still do it sometimes all year long. We would be like, I received that.
Yeah.
Pause, take a breath, and say, I received that. And the kids heard us saying that. Now the students will say it sometimes too. And so it's really fun. But
It's interesting how like
yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how we like as a society are so averse to receiving kindness from other people. Well, partially Southern society, like niceness it can be really fake. And so we're not always sure when someone's being kind, but when they are being genuinely kind, we sort of still seem averse to it. But it's also interesting, like in your story, how like just a shift in language and habit sort of
Mhm.
has this like larger cultural implications where the children are learning to also receive kind words and give them.
Well, I think that
Um,
was part of it for us too, was we realized that we weren't modeling that for the kids. And so
yeah,
that gave us kind of I don't know, with the mindset that most of us have, where we just want these kids to have everything that they need.
yeah.
That motivated us to model that a little bit better for them, or a lot better for
Yeah,
them.
well, you need to have like a bunch of Ruth Parises, right? Like
Yeah.
kind words, and I'm gonna give you a B.
And I'm going to respect it because I know that it was an
Yeah.
earned B.
Yeah, and everything you say that's kind, I know that you mean it. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so here's an interesting question for you, and I think I'm intrigued by this because I know that you have some complicated like history with religion and stuff like that. So when you think about God, like what kinds of things come to mind?
Okay, so one of my friends is not religious, and my one of my best friends in the world not religious at all, and grew up Catholic and had that complicated history. And her reaction was more to step away from all of it. So we've had a lot of conversations because my reaction has been to question a lot, but to also like just relentlessly hold on to the fact that there's something at the core of it. And again, it goes back to that nature thing. Like I see God in nature.
Just can't escape it. Yeah.
And yeah, I can't let go of that. There's just that's the part that always brings me back. But when I think about God, she was like, "Well, what is God to you?" And I was like, "And what's central to your beliefs?" And I was like, "What's central for me is God is love, and He created us in that image. Those are the two central pieces, and He created this beautiful world that gave us a space to try to do our best with. And if I think so, when I think of that phrase, God is love, and that was always, I grew up in a church, well, not grew up, my teenage part of my formative years was in a Church of Christ environment, and we would sing those a cappella songs. And the one that I love the most is The Greatest Command. Have you ever heard that song in
No,
four-part
uh-uh.
harmony? Oh, it's so beautiful. I need to send it to you sometime. But it's just that verse sung so beautifully. But that to me is at the core. God is love, and He wants us to love each other, and He wants us to keep that central to everything we do.
That's really cool. That's really cool. It is interesting how I once heard somebody say something about like people's primary view of God will be shaped by the songs they sing.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting like that you went to these hymns as an affirmation of what you were already experiencing in nature.
Yeah. Oh, and even I can remember my mom and I, once we all started going to church together, we would be standing beside each other, and there's some song about like a mansion in heaven, or I'm gonna have my mansion in heaven. I can't even remember the
Yeah.
words. And my mom and I looked at each other, and she went, "I don't want to clean that."
Yeah.
And that wasn't, but then when we're talking about the ones where it's like going to the river and the mountains and the sea and like all the ones with nature, those were the ones that I identified with the most.
No, it is interesting to think about like a little memory like that. This is like this one-off comment, but
Hmm.
also in that environment in Tennessee, like that's pretty like gender subversive for her to just be like, yeah, I'm not doing that for eternity.
I'm not going to be a maid in heaven.
Oh, okay. And this brings me back to a question I want to ask you at the beginning, and then we'll kind of circle back to the last question. You said that when you went to the Primitive Baptist Church, that the women would wash the feet of the men. Did they force you to do that at 6 years old?
No, I never washed anybody's feet, and I don't remember ever having mine washed either. But I remember seeing the women go up there and do that for the men.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. I think it's also as soon as you said it, it was fascinating to me. And I don't know enough about their traditions or whatever to be like critical, but it is interesting to me that Jesus institutes that practice
Yeah.
as a way for the most powerful to serve the least powerful. And it sounds like they kind of reversed it and just like reinforced the social order of men over women.
Yeah. Which tracks in
Yeah, yeah,
American
right.
culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what patriarchy does to the good religion of Jesus, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Uh,
speaking of church, what brought you to Memphis first and sort of like, what are the things at our church that make you feel like, this is your place and for you and your family?
We visited churches. Okay, so we moved here 8 years ago. We visited churches. I mean, I wish I had a number of churches that we visited. It was so hard to find a place that met all of the needs for our family. We needed it to, the patriarchal aspect had to be minimal because that's just
80% of the churches in Memphis are already off the table if you're talking
they're
about
they're already
patriarchy.
gone. And
Yeah.
then you get into, well, like, our family's diverse, racially diverse, and it was important that we had representation for all members of our family. That was important. That took a lot of churches off the table. And because we thought about, for Cora, we wanted her to be able to experience going to church with people of color, with Black people specifically. But we also didn't want to be a primarily white family. Kind of, we felt like we were almost invading that safe space
It,
in
it
a
gets
lot of Black
complicated.
culture, and it does get complicated. And so finding a space that provided that for our family we were shocked. We were actually, one of the reasons we were so excited to move to Memphis was we thought churches won't be so segregated. Won't that be wonderful? They
Oh,
are
wow.
so segregated
Yeah.
in Memphis. So that was really hard to find. And I wanted to find a place where I was shamed so much as a child. From the time I was 10 years old, I had people telling me that if I wore a bathing suit that showed this much of my stomach, that I would be a stumbling block to men and all of that nonsense. And so I was like, I'm not willing to put Cora in that position and ever
Right.
put her in a position where anybody ever makes her feel guilty because she has a body. that God
Right.
made in his
Right.
image. We're not going down that road. So that was that was a deal breaker at a lot of places. But Memphis First, again, it's like, it seems to be it's people who are trying to make church better, and I know looking at it from the outside, it's also been really hard to go into established churches as a family that's not established in the
Right.
community, and become a part of it. That was really challenging because there were some churches where we're like, we love it, but we can't find a way to feel like we're a part of it.
Yeah.
And so we kind of let go of that as a priority, and we're like, that's just going to take time. But at Memphis First, it's the mindset doesn't seem to be like centrally focused. It's not what can we do for ourselves, it's what can we do for the community around us,
Mm.
which I think is such a beautiful thing. And I think such an example to the kids. We're not great at getting involved in those things because I'm cripplingly introverted and Joseph works a lot. And
Yeah,
so
and it's not, I
it's
mean,
tough
that's
to
part of
get
the
involved in
interest in
that
the
way.
question, right? Like the part of the interest is it's not even an easy location to access for many people. Yeah.
Yeah, but we love downtown. We think it's beautiful down there. But we love, with Memphis First, we love the diversity of the backgrounds of the people and how people are coming from so many different places. And, but there's still, despite that, there's still so much common ground with what people value, with what you're allowed to say from the pulpit. There are times when I know the world is not in a great state and I just need to kind of cocoon myself off from it. And I just, and sometimes I can't go to church if I know
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
one of those times because I know I need to block myself off from all of it. But
Yeah.
then there are times when I'm like, okay, I need to go and be around like-minded people and know that we feel similarly about the way that the world
No, you're not alone.
right now, and just know that you're not by yourself. Yeah, church for me though, it's just important to try to keep coming back to it. And Memphis First, there's a book. I did my homework. There's a book. Sarah Bessey? Have you read Sarah Bessey books?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, Out of Sorts. It took me 3 years to read it because I would read a little bit and it would be so hard to process. So comforting that I wasn't by myself in my experiences, but also so sad to understand that there were other
Mm.
people in the world experiencing similar things. But Out of Sorts, it took me 3 years, but it was glorious. But she talked about, there was a page in her chapter on the people of God. She said, I want the Tinies to know that however much I mess up, however much I fall short of my own ideals, I was planted in the house of God because this is where I practice it, learn it, start it all over again. Because I want my Tinies to know the same, to know what my voice sounds like when I sing Amazing Grace.
Wow.
And I was like, that's what keeps me like fighting for a space that can be ours where they can have those memories, but also fighting for a space where it's not tinged with the negatives that I had as a child. I remember when we had that dance party thing at
Yeah.
Christmas. Okay,
Yeah.
my energy was so weird. Everybody was like, "Why is this chick such a weirdo?" I know that. And it's okay. That was one of the most overwhelming experiences of my entire life,
Uh,
but it was so beautiful. You walked up to Cora and said, "Hey, Cora, will you want to come dance?" And it was my preacher dancing with my daughter. And I'm coming from a background where I was told that I was a sinner and I was risking my soul for dancing and that I was a stumbling block and made to feel nothing but guilt for this thing that was designed to bring joy. And that was such a beautiful moment, but it was also so overwhelming. And I was like, I have to just sit back. I can't. I'm having a hard time processing this.
I love it.
But I hope that she gets to hold on. But moments like that are why Memphis First is so
Well, see,
special.
and I would have never like I remember doing that, but I would have never thought about it probably again until you brought it up. But like again, like I think that's to go back to what you were saying at the very beginning, like there are these moments where we have these like effects in people's lives
Hmm.
and we're just doing what feels natural or whatever, but for other people because of their background or whatever, like there's this profound kind of spiritual influence. And I think it just like reveals how much of this like spiritual experience stuff is really just like everyday be yourself and like God shows up kind of stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, Natalie, I am super grateful for you joining me today, and I'm looking forward to our congregation getting to know you.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this, Tom. It's awesome.
You bet.